Well, I guess if there was one thing to grab from Super Mario Bros. 2, it would be this. It seems like after the first wave of the booster course passed, they decided to turn back time and fill in the blanks for any game that they skipped. Although it does kind of annoy me that in this wave they decided to go with the turnip and the propeller. Once again ignoring the best power-up in the entire series, the feather. I guess the turnip has made a few more appearances throughout the years. Pretty sure it was in the Luncheon Kingdom in Mario Odyssey. But then they just went straight to the new Super Mario Bros. Series, and after that it was like Galaxy and Odyssey and whatnot. You could argue that maybe they were saving the feather to be one of the big finales, but after the feather came the cherry. So I doubt that. I don't know who at Mario Kart hates the feather. Even when they bought into this game, it's a multiplayer exclusive item. But the more I go on about this, the more it angers me. But to be a little bit more positive, I'm glad they brought the turnip in. I wonder if back when they brought in the Super Leaf, they were actually debating to bring in the turnip. Maybe when they figured they ran out of items from the first Super Mario Bros. Game, they thought about Super Mario Bros. 2, but didn't have enough confidence in their decision to going with the turnip, and that's why they went to the Super Leaf. Which makes sense, to be honest. But still, when you have 12 new Grand Prix to fill up, every emblem becomes good all of a sudden. It's like when you're hungry and you open the fridge but nothing looks appealing. But then 1 hour later, when you're 1 hour hungrier, all of a sudden your standards are not quite as high. And at that point, you eat the turnips. This is probably more information than you guys need, but I had to actually edit this thing. Most of the emblems that I've used for the thumbnails and in these videos were very easy to find high quality versions of, primarily because most of them exist in this game to some extent. There were a handful of them where I had to grab from something else and maybe rotate it or upscale it a little bit so it fits in better with the rest of them. Like I had to use the Wii's Crown Cup emblem, for example. The fruit, the Super Bell, the Lucky Cat. For the most part, I just had to either smoothen out the outside or make the border look a little bit better before I added the black borders. The problem I had with the turnip is that there is no 3D model of the turnip that faces forward. And this is probably something that you guys have all already noticed, but my brain tends to catch onto things that are not all that important for no reason. So I wanted the emblem for Mario Kart 8's Turnip Cup to match what I used as a PNG. So for the turnip, I actually had to remove the eyes and bring in the eyes from the flower cup so that it could be facing forward. The area on the top, which I'm going to refer to as the hair of the turnip, I just accepted that it was going to be as it is. Figured nobody would notice. So it's probably counterintuitive that I'm even telling you guys all this. But yeah, if anybody ever wants a file of a turnip facing forward, shoot me a message and I'll email it to you. Here's my courtesy reminder that I'm going through every single Grand Prix in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. If you're new, the link to the playlist is in the description. You can go back and watch every video before this one too. And if you're not a fan of waiting for my daily 11 AM drops, joining my Patreon allows you to watch my videos as I complete them. I think free members also get access to a built-in chat on there, so it might be worth joining that at least if you want to save the money and just watch my videos every day at 11 AM. Who knows, depending on how this all goes, maybe I'll open a Discord. But I've wasted enough of your time. It's time to discuss the Booster Course Pass's Turnip Cup. The first track is a tour track, New York Minute. The second track is from the Super Nintendo, Mario Circuit 3. The third track is from the Nintendo 64, Calamari Desert. And the fourth track is the famous Waluigi Pinball. So here's a random tidbit. New York is one of my favorite cities in the world. First time I even went was in my mid to late 20s. But now I find myself going back there almost every year. I am by no means a New Yorker. When I go there, I probably stick out like a sore thumb. Especially considering that when I go there, I spend way too much money at the Nintendo store. And while I think they did an excellent job picking some of the best cities around the world for Mario Kart Tour, I was pretty hyped for New York Minute before I even got to play it. The assets have a lot of that plasticky feel that some of the earlier tracks did, but I still love the way that this looks. The track starts you off in Times Square with a giant Donkey Kong tower right in front of you. Feels like you're in New Donk City, which is also based off New York. As soon as you start, you make your way straight into Central Park, which I think the nighttime setting makes it look more unique than it would if it was daytime. Once you make it back to the starting line, this time you're going to go left. Back through Central Park, dodge a few bursting sewer manholes and taxi cabs, and as you wrap up the third lap, you might notice things like the Empire State Building, the Rockefeller Center, and even Broadway. As simplistic as this is, and as much as I feel like they could have done so much more with it, I still love this one. It's a 3-pointer for me. I also don't find it to be too hard or too complicated, and while I think many of the other tour tracks can get samey at times, this one does a good job keeping its own personality, and I'm not gonna lie, it's mostly because of the night theme. I might have a bias for this one because of my affinity for New York, But what can I say? It's a track I love to play, and that's what gets you 3 points. Next up, we have Mario Circuit 3. I don't know if there's a better skill check in the game. Everything's flat, it's all one path with a lot of weaving. Speed burst will be your best friend here because that's the only way to take shortcuts. I do think that this track against CPUs is really boring, but I have a lot of fun playing this one online because I feel like it's a huge skill test. One of those locked in and lean forward type of tracks. I'm guessing if you remember my opinion of the other SNES tracks, as well as some of the simpler GBA ones, then you could probably guess I was going to give this one a 3. Some tracks I love because they have a lot going on, others can get a lot of love for their pure simplicity. But when they're simple and can still be competitive and difficult, that's one of those sweet spots. After that, we get to go to the famous train of the famous desert of Calamari. I don't know if this was just me, but back on the Nintendo 64, I used to intentionally slow down because I wanted to have to stop and wait for the train to pass. I just felt like it was such a cool concept to get stuck behind the train and have to wait for it to move forward to continue your race. Now I think it's kind of ridiculous, but I have a whole lot of love for Calamari Desert just for the memories and for the way that they've improved it in this game. I know there are a lot of people that disagree with that sentiment, but I think there are also a lot of people that agree with it. I'm guessing the biggest reason this one might get hate is because it's not exactly like the original version. And I can understand that, but I like the changes in this one. I think it offers more than, for example, adding a cave in Choco Mountain. Also, for some reason, I feel like people don't consider this one a desert track. I think because it has more of that old western vibe type of desert, rather than the vast and empty yellow vibe that most of the other ones have. Anyway, what's cool about Calamari Desert is that the first lap kind of feels similar to what you would expect. You're more or less going through a similar type of track from the original, with a whole lot of shortcut ramps available if you have power-ups. The first lap is pretty basic, it's just to get your bearings in order. But around halfway through the second lap, a ramp forces you to jump onto the tracks and drive straight towards the train. This is really cool for a few reasons. Number one, on a first time playthrough, if you have nostalgia for this game, it'll completely catch you off guard. This is nothing like what happened in Mario 64. But the other reason it's really cool is because a lot of us in Mario 64 used to like to just screw around. We would get off course and we would go around the tracks, just to have fun. And I think when they were making this course, they knew that we were all doing that. It's pretty well discussed in the community, so of course they did. So I think when they did this in the second lap, that was a very smart move to appeal to us. I mean, it worked on me like a charm. Plus you have very little space to maneuver around the train, making it way more of an obstacle here than it was on the first lap. You'll even get to go through the cave and then end up back on the main road and head towards the finish line. Not only do I think this is a good retro track, I think this is one of the best ways they implemented the retro feel in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. I equate this with something like Royal Raceway. Imagine in that track, instead of taking away the opportunity to drive through the castle, they instead alter the course so that you would actually drive right up to the castle and go around it. It's basically the same idea here, and I think the nod to the nostalgia of this whole scenario makes for a more dynamic track and better race in general. 3 points. Clearly 3 points. Up next is Waluigi Pinball. Instead of wasting your time gushing over a track that's probably the best one in the franchise, let's just agree that this is a 3-pointer and I'm going to talk about Waluigi instead. Mario Tennis on the Nintendo 64 was one of my favorite games growing up. I have hated Waluigi since the first time I saw him. I don't think it's because of his looks. I've always been a fan of Wario, so much so that he was the inspiration for my avatar. And by inspiration, I mean I literally took a Wario and edited it. Maybe it's because I was a short and chubby kid, and Waluigi was tall and lanky, but something about him just didn't sit right with me. Personally, the more he gets relegated into a spin-off character, the happier I am. When everybody was freaking out because he wasn't included in Smash, the only thing that was annoying me was how popular he was becoming, even though he was nothing more than a meme. And the more popular he was becoming, the less popular Wario was becoming. That just made me even more angry. And while I dislike the fact that Wario has been seen as a buffoon because of certain Mario Party content creators, turning him into a loser, the one positive of said content creators is that Wario is regaining his popularity, and his brother is once again being shoved to the back. May he forever remain a spin-off character, and may he never get his own official game. Hey, but his pinball track is dope, triple S tier for me. Aesthetics, set pieces, uniqueness, difficulty, how dynamic it is, everything. Easiest 3 points I've ever given. Let's tally this all up. Mario Kart 8 Deluxe's Turnip Cup's first track, New York Minute, gets 3 points because I loved it. The second track's Mario Circuit 3 from Super Nintendo also gets 3 points because I loved it. The third track's Calamari Desert from the Nintendo 64 also gets 3 points because I loved it. And Waluigi Stadium gets 3 points because it's phenomenal. The 4 tracks, I would say, are perfectly diverse. And while I momentarily debated whether New York Minute or Mario Circuit 3 were more difficult, after replaying it, I think it's obvious that Mario Circuit 3 is more difficult than New York Minute. I believe New York Minute was the first track in Mario Kart Tour, so that makes sense. They kept it simple, they kept it easy. And I think that's part of the reason it's so fun. That's 16 points and a perfect score. I'm guessing this is going to be pretty controversial for a lot of you. The Tour track and the SNES track are obviously going to be controversial. Those are love it or hate it by nature. But surprisingly, I've seen a lot of distaste towards Calamari Desert and Waluigi Pinball as well. And likewise, I've also seen a lot of love. Although I'm pretty sure they're mostly loved. But what can I say, not only is this a 16-pointer, but it's a 16-pointer that I was pretty confident about before I even started. So I guess we can shift our focus towards the Propeller Cup. That'll do, Turnip. That'll do.